Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I am Megan Shamus. I am the Director of Marketing for the Fido Alliance. It's really nice to be with you here today. So we've started a new webinar series where every month we cover an important topic relating to Fido, and we open up the floor to your questions. So instead of Ask Me Anything or AMA, we're calling this an AFA or Ask Fido Anything. So please do ask us anything at the conclusion of the presentation today. Our focus today is on the Phyto Certified program, which is a core activity of the Fido Alliance. It's really the most important aspect of the whole B2B Fido ecosystem of interoperable products and services. But before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes as always. We're in On24, so you'll see some widgets on your screen, as well as a control panel at the bottom. So you can remove widgets or make them larger, move them around. It's kind of yours to do what you would like with that. You can use the important widget is the question widget. So leverage that to ask questions for the AFA at the end of the presentation. Some we might answer as we go, but we'll probably save most of them for the AFA portion. We are recording the webinar, and we will make the recording and the slides available to you. So we'll email them to you, and we'll post them at fidoalliance.org. And then lastly, please stay on at the end and take the survey. It's really important and really helpful for us to get your feedback on our market adoption programs and the type of education that you're interested in us providing to you. So let me introduce our speakers for today. So you know me. I'm not really a speaker today. I'm just the chief question asker at the end of the presentation. But importantly, we have Dr. Ray Rivera with us here today. Dr. Ray Rivera is the Director of Certification for the Fido Alliance. Ray leads all aspects of our development and execution of the Fido Certified program. So she is the perfect person to have with us today for this presentation. So Ray, let me hand it over to you to give the latest on Fido Certified.
Great, thank you, Megan. And welcome everybody. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today. From a high-level perspective, the agenda, we're going to cover our product certification benefits and the different certification programs that the Alliance offers. And we'll kind of discuss a little bit what's on our horizon. And at the very end, you can ask Fido anything. So we look forward to the Q&A. So to start, with product certification, there's many different benefits that can be achieved by going through the certification program. Especially from the Alliance perspective. And that's the standardization for industry, becoming a market differentiator because you are certified, requirements, and then also our consumer protection. We do want to introduce you to the very first poll, and I would like you to take some time and answer it. So we have about I'm going to time you 10 seconds to answer the poll. And we do appreciate your feedback. So we try to be interactive as much as we can. So if you haven't answered the poll, please take the next couple seconds. I'm going to go through and see, hopefully we've got some answers here. So standardization for the industry seems to be the most important to align with your organizational needs. Next up is market differentiation, then consumer protection. So let's go through these. From Fido's perspective, so one of the biggest benefits that Fido enables within our certification program is that we do have a compliant perspective. So most times when an organization develops specifications, they're vigilant and that goes through a rigorous process in order to show that you are conformant, interoperable, and compliant. So that's the big reason for any kind of standardization. Next is a market differentiator. And I think there's like 14% chose this one. So within the alliance, it's organizations or relying parties are requesting that their products that they utilize for authentication and later on probably for identity is a certified product. And so going through the Phyto certification helps you stand out against your competition, shows that you have gone through a rigorous process to get your product certified, and gives you a general competitive edge. So that's really big with being a market differentiator. I didn't see very many primary for their industry, but we do see more and more various governments on an international level or relying on Fido authentication for their programs. So within the regulatory environment, from financial to healthcare to government industries, we're seeing more and more that this is coming into place and becoming an important aspect for certified products and for protection. So while we all know Fido, and more relying parties are becoming to know Fido, and more organizations and vendors are implementing and certifying products, the consumer outlet is one that probably isn't the most well known. And what Fido has done is they started doing more about how do we get our consumers in the know, and a Fido certified product is a quality product that ensures security and trust and enables consumers to make informed purchases, and that they know and understand that if it's a certified Fido certified product, that it's gone through a rigorous certification process. And one of the things that we've done is we have this whole idea around understanding Fido for the consumer marketplace. And it's going to become a really big outreach for Fido Alliance itself. Programs. There are basically right now 3 certification programs that the Fido Alliance implements. The first one is our functional certification. We also have our Fido Authenticator Certification, and then the Biometric Component Certification. I'm not going to go into the details on the process and everything. I'm just going to go high level on what these programs mean and what the testing involved is. The poll question is, what are you planning to certify? So hopefully you're on this call because you're interested in getting your products certified. A couple minutes, 10 seconds to answer this poll question, and I'll have a better idea of how to address maybe some of your potential questions at the end. On and see how everybody answered. All right, so all right, that's fine. Authenticator certification, got a few out there for servers. An interesting. Biometric. And then of course, obviously, if you're not planning to certify, that's fine. It's definitely worth to understand our certification program regardless. All right, so what is functional certification? Functional certification, most form of certification. And this is where we look at conformance test validations. So we have 3 FIDO2, UAF, and U2F. And when you implement those specifications to create a product, we have a test suite that validates that product against the specification. So it's the technical validity that your product meets the requirements of the specification. The second part of the functional certification that brings vendors together to test their products against each other to validate the interoperability of that product in the marketplace. So it's kind of like you buy a plug and you know that plug is going to go into a socket because it's certified by UL and it meets certain requirements. and you're going to be able to, because it interoperates. So this is the same concept. Then we test the interoperability. Easy enough. There are several program documents for the functional program. The first and foremost are the specifications. So you decide which type of product you want to implement, go through the specifications, and then develop your product. There are also applicable common specification documents. So these are documents that align, they're common to all specifications, and it adds additional details on implementations. So you want to make sure that you are also downloading, utilizing, and understanding those documents. Now, the primary guidance document for functional certification is the policy document, and that explains entirely how we manage our program, the governance of the program, the guidance of the program, and how you go through certification. So those are the three main documents for functional certification. Moving on to Authenticator Certification. This is basically for all authenticators. It's the combination of the functional certification, so the conformance testing, the interoperability testing, plus additional. So not only do you have to meet the specifications from a technical perspective, but there are additional requirements that we have for our authenticators from a security perspective. And the combination of those is the Authenticator Certification program. Sorry about that. We all know what it's like to work from home. So part of the security evaluation, that complete what we call our vendor questionnaire. The vendor questionnaire is related to specific levels. As you see on the bottom, there's a note that there's different security levels that you can select on the specification that you're implementing. So the vendor questionnaire, the most basic level is level 1, and I'll kind of introduce the levels in the next slide. You complete that, and if you're implementing Phyto 2, then you just complete all the questions related to level 1 for Phyto 2 products. Each question or requirement within the vendor questionnaire has a correlated test procedure, and that test procedure is the evaluation that either the security secretariat or the lab will conduct to make sure and in the vendor questionnaire is accurate, complete, and valid. So that's kind of the security evaluation for our authenticators. Now, as I stated before, we do have security levels, and we have 3 base levels. Progress up the ladder, level of characteristics from a security perspective. So the basic level 1 is our basic authenticator security. So it's the implementation of the specifications from a technical perspective, and addition to these at level 1 are software-based solutions. And then when we get into level 2, there's additional requirements. Utilizes what we call an allowed restricted operating environment, or an AROE. Fido Alliance has defined what allowed operating environments can be utilized for the implementations at level 2 and above, and it's defined within a document. Utilizing an AROE, like a secure element or a TEE, comes with additional inherent security assurances. So that's the primary reason for utilizing this at this level. Then the highest level is level 3. So incorporating all of the requirements for level 1, all of the requirements for level 2, we have added assurances that relate to hardware protections. And we test against those. So an actual lab will conduct penetration testing, vulnerability assessment type testing, and things like that. The other requirement for this level is that it has to have a companion program. So a companion program is kind of common criteria or GPTEE. So if your product is already certified under common criteria or GPTEE, then you would be able to achieve the level 3 requirements. And you would only have to kind of show the delta differences from those programs to what Fido requires in our security program. So the other thing to note is it. So it has additional, like level 1 plus or level 2 plus or level 3 plus, that adds additional security assurances for that basic level. Okay. Within the Authenticator program, there are several documents, and it's really important to note that along with the functional program documents, so the functional certification documents, the policy documents, the specifications, the common documents, there are additional policy documents for the Authenticator Certification program. There are the security requirements. We do have a vendor questionnaire worksheet, which is basically incorporates the security requirements into a worksheet that you can use and type in your information for submission. As I mentioned, there is an allowed restricted operating document. So this is the defined allowed environments that can be utilized within this program for Fido certification. We also have an allowed cryptography list. So that's the allowed cryptography that you can use within this program itself. And then the Authenticator metadata requirements. So it's really important if you go down the road of certification for an authenticator, which many what you're going to be certifying, just make sure that you look at all the program documents and all the requirements based upon the level that you'd like to achieve for you out there. And it's really important that you understand that you have to look at it as a whole rather than piece by piece. Okay. All right, so moving on, we do have the Fido Biometric Component Certification, and it's basically intended to certify components or subsystems and is independent from the Authenticator Certification program. So even though authenticators typically, especially nowadays, utilize some sort of a biometric component, it's not necessary except to be certified as an for the authenticator, but it is highly recommended. So what do we look at? What's tested? So in this program, just at the base level, if you look at the requirements documents, you'll see it's a lot more complex than what I have here on the screen. But we do look at the false accept rate. We do test for the false reject rate. And then we also do what we call PAD testing, so presentation attack detection. And all those tests combined at certain levels allow a biometric component to be certified under the biometric program. Now, there is a component of this program that includes the potential for a vendor to come to us and say that they self-attest to, higher than the current requirements for the program. We don't just take that for, just whatever they say it is. We actually have the lab do the validation based upon their data set. So instead of actually doing and conducting the entire test, they'll receive the vendor test data, and then they'll run all the calculations based on the date, that self-attestation. So that is an option for the program as well. So as I mentioned before, using a certified biometric subcomponent. So this is an independent program from Authentic, but the two can be intertwined. And here's where it kind of gets a little more complex. It's optional for authenticators using a biometric at our level 1 and level 2. So if you remember going back to our levels, level 1, 2, and 3, it's optional for 1 and 2. But there is an instance within the security requirements that enforce the biometric certifications at higher levels. So level 3, if you want to achieve level 3 certification, and your authenticator uses like a biometric component, is required to be Fido certified under our program. Okay. We do have, as I mentioned, also the pluses. So at level 2+, which we don't have that program finalized and defined at this point in time, it's still in the works, require that the biometric component be Fido certified. Okay. So the combination of the two, Fido certified biometric, authenticator, incorporated into an authenticator, at the end is what you have, a complete Fido certified authenticator product. So it's the end-to-end product. Okay. So as with the other programs, the biometric program has its own component certification program policy. There is the biometric certification requirements document also includes the test procedures so all of the biometric component certifications are conducted through a lab and overseen by our biometric secretariat to make sure that each lab is conducting the tests according to the guidelines as stated within the program documents. There is also what we call an allowed integration document, and this is a template that is completed by the vendor and submitted to the lab for testing, and it defines basically how this biometric gets integrated into the authenticator. So it's a guidance document, like the glass, the lighting, all the different things, the software, hardware, anything within that biometric component that if it gets integrated will maintain the testing results. So if it's already achieved a certain level of testing, we want to make sure that when it gets integrated, that that level maintains that documentation. And then also there's a metadata requirements. So within the metadata requirements document, there's defined fields for biometric components that have to be completed. Okay. So I'm going to launch the last poll. So please take next 10 seconds or so that if you plan to certify, when do you plan to certify? Okay, so let's take a look at the results. All right, so it seems pretty even between Q2, 3, and 4 this year, and then several have indicated next year sometime. So I will say we do have an intra-op event coming up in June. It will be virtual. And Q3 and Q4 are slated to be in person if everything starts to work itself out and we open up. It'd be nice to kind of start seeing everybody face to face again. So we'll look forward to that. And then as well as in 2022. We always have 4 inter-op events every year. And we do offer on demand. So if you don't meet the deadline to get qualify or our drop events, always feel free to reach out to us and schedule an on-demand test. All right, so lastly, what's on the horizon? So we have a couple programs that are in the works. Let me correct myself, proper English. And the first one is the Fido device onboarding certification. So this is basically defining Fido. It will include functional testing. So if you remember all the way back at the very beginning when we talked about functional testing, is the conformance testing and interoperability, but it will also include a requirement for security. So it's going to be similar to the Authenticator certification that will include the functional testing and the security requirements. So that's in the works. The second one is the Fido Document Authentication Certification Program. And this is authentication and verification of identity documents. So it's looking at, like passports or driver's licenses, and whether or not the programs or the vendors that implement these devices to validate them meet certain requirements. So this program is going to be very similar to the biometric program as it relates to document authenticity. So look to hopefully launching both of these in the second half of this year. And if you're interested in learning more about any of them, I know that we're doing a lot of details out on our web pages, and feel free to email anyone in the certification program. We'd be more than happy to answer your questions. And that is it. And thank you very much for attending. I guess we'll go to questions.
Thanks, Ray. I'm back, everyone. Hello. So please put in your questions in the question widget. We do have a couple here, actually a bunch. Okay, so Ray, let's talk a little bit about pad testing, and really just, it's kind of a two-part question. So one of the questions is around labs. So what's our process for identifying and certifying labs to conduct biometric testing? So maybe start with that one, and then I'll ask the second part of that.
Okay, sure, yes. So all of the labs that we accredit, so we go through a very rigorous accreditation process. There's an application that needs to be completed, specific requirements regarding certifications like ISO 17025. There's operational requirements, financial requirements, security requirements, and then not only looking at that, but additional certifications that would be needed within the industry as it relates to either security, because we do have labs that are devoted to our security program, and as it relates to biometrics. Each lab goes through a training. It's about a 2-day training, and then each of the evaluators, in order to be listed on the evaluation as an evaluator, has to take and pass an exam. So we do have a pretty rigorous process in place. All of our labs are identified on our website. I think we have 8 biometric labs right now. And then with regard to the program, as labs get products to certify, they coordinate with our biometric secretariat and develop the test plans, the test procedures. They get the all the the instruments, for pad testing approved based on the requirements for the level of the biometric program. And then, so that's helps to create a consistent rigor across all of the biometric labs that are doing the testing. So it's a pretty rigorous process to become a lab.
Okay, thank you, Ray. So the follow-up to that, so I know I'm looking over to the side, I've just pulled up the website about our certified labs, and I can send the link out because they were asking where they could see the list of accredited labs. I'll send that link out, but I can name, they were asking if you could name a few. I know iBeta and FEAM are 2 that I see here.
Yeah. IDAP, so we have FEAM, IDAP, CIACT, TTA. So we have a pretty iBeta, global representation of labs.
Right, that's great. Yeah, and if you look on the website, which again, I'll send around, you can see the global representation and the countries represented here. So a few questions, okay, a lot of questions coming in now. So a few questions around functional certification and, how that relates to the certification level. So one question is, is functional certification a prerequisite for L1? So it might be helpful to just describe how the levels kind of build on each other.
Okay, yep, that's fine. So functional testing is the base starting point for any product to go through certification. So we have servers, SDKs, authenticators, and all products have to meet the base level requirement of functional. So level 1 is our base authenticator. So when you start talking about the security requirements, they only relate to authenticators that are being certified. You have to pass the conformance test, you have to pass interoperability, and then you would complete the vendor questionnaire. There is an interoperability questionnaire that we go through on that event, and then also a metadata validation that we do for level 1. All the higher levels, you're going to deal just with the lab for the security evaluation. However, like I said, functional always is the base. So you would go through the conformance testing, interoperability, and then coordinate with the lab to complete the security requirements and test procedures. So hopefully that was clear.
I think so. Yes, that was very clear, Ray. Thank you. So another question around, so if you're very specific question, if you're certifying a Fido 2 mobile authenticator, are you certifying both iOS and Android at the same time? Is it a requirement to certify both?
It's not required to certify both. However, I just want to make sure that with Fido 2, that there's an understanding that it has to connect through one of the 3 transports that are defined within the Fido 2 specification. So a lot of times we get a lot of questions for Fido 2 and wondering if they can create and things like that. In an authenticator, probably the primary form of connection would be through Bluetooth. However, NFC is fine, and then BLE. Well, probably wouldn't plug your phone into your computer, but anyways. So I just want to make sure that that is understood. But if you just want to certify for an iOS device, you can do that. If you want to certify Android, you can do that. If you want to do both, you're more than welcome to do that. So we've had vendors do one, the other, whatever their preference is, and some have done both.
Great, thanks, Ray. Okay, so, this is an interesting question. This is a good question. Regarding those that go through the interop testing, how long is that test valid for? Meaning if you tested last year, can you certify this year? Is there some expiration of that test?
Yeah, so if you've passed interoperability, conformance testing and interoperability, and it's been longer than 6 months, that's no longer valid.
Okay, great. I think that we have asked everything. So there's one question around attestation.
Okay. Eek.
So just generally, what is the role of attestation in certification? Is that validated during the certification process?
Yeah, so we do have conformance tests that do test the attestation of the product being certified, as well as the metadata requirements. So if you're interested in understanding how that's all tested, then I would go through the metadata requirements. And with regard to the attestation certificate, it's one of the important aspects of our certification program. We do validate the metadata, and we do offer the Fido metadata service. And that is the attestation certificate is one of the validation points for relying parties to trust that if it's a Fido certified product, that it has gone through a rigorous process for validating that information, including the attestation certificate. So it is a primary component of the certification.
Okay, great. I think there's a few questions that are very specific to certain companies that are certifying. So what we'll do is we'll just have Ray follow up with you directly after this and address your specific questions, and we're happy to do that. Are there any other questions? I think we've gone through everything that we have at the moment. If anyone wants to ask a question, this is your chance. We'll just give it a second. Okay, seeing none, I want to thank Dr. Rivera for your time today. This was a great presentation. Thank you all for attending, and we'll wrap up now. Please do stay on and take the survey. We appreciate you being here. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.